Hi and hello and welcome to our live conversation. Today we are talking about suicide prevention and awareness, and of course the topic is suicide can be prevented. Is this a fact or is this fiction? And with me today is Karen Griffith, and I'm gonna just bring her bio over and read it. Welcome, Karen. So Karen Griffith is a mental health counselor with a master's in mental health counseling from Fordham University, and she has a bachelor's in psychology from the University of the West Indies. Her experiences include working with at risk teens, families, and adults, including those with intellectual and developmental disabilities across various treatment settings. Karen is currently the admissions coordinator and mental health counselor at Verdun and Marina House in Barbados. She provides counseling to adults with substance abuse or co occurring disorders. Karen uses a strength based, client centered approach in working with her clients, and she integrates a range of therapeutic techniques and methods to assist persons in reaching their full potential. Karen's goal is to help clients identify their underlying strengths and to utilize those strengths in achieving their stated goals. Outside of work, Karen is a believer in all things self care and living life in balance. Thank you very much, Karen, for being here. And let's get our conversation started. Can you tell us a little bit about like how did you get into this field? And of course, how did you really come into this relationship with Verdun and Marina House?
Okay, thank you so much, Gil, first of all, for that lovely introduction and for having me be a part of this panel discussion today. I'm really happy to be here and certainly looking forward to this conversation that really is an important one. In terms of how I got into this field, I was always interested in psychology. From the
Mm-hmm.
time I started the interest in psychology course back in college, it was just something that has piqued my interest, and it was a career that I just decided to go ahead and pursue. I was interested at that time in getting to have some experience with a number of different populations. So when I had completed my studies, I was always interested in working with substance abusers, and I decided to volunteer with Verdun House, and that started a host of opportunities, which led me to where I am today. So I'm really happy to be here and honored to be a part of this panel discussion.
And we are happy to have you with us. So
Thank
let's
you.
get into the meat of the matter. Why do you think suicide is a taboo? Why can't we talk about it? Why can't we start a conversation and we try to sweep it under the rug so
Hmm.
much?
Definitely. It is still a very taboo topic. In fact, it's one of the most misunderstood topics generally. And a lot of
Hmm.
it has to do with misconceptions, myths that people have about suicide, and just generally because of the nature of the topic. I think that a lot of the stigma associated with suicide is really rooted in weakness and blame. This is what my research has shown me, and even sin and crime. So the stigma surrounding that can really then cloud people's perceptions and their thoughts, and then that, is shown in their behaviors and their actions.
Hmm.
People avoid talking about suicide, and so it's really important then for these types of conversations to be had because, and also in light of it too being September National Suicide Prevention Month, this is a great opportunity to bring those conversations to the forefront so that we can dispel whatever misconceptions people have and encourage people to talk about something like suicide because it really is something that is becoming a growing health problem, and a lot of persons are suffering, families, individuals, with this difficult topic.
Hmm. And that's a good point because you talked about myths. And in my research for this session today, I came across two of them. So it's believed that we don't want to talk about suicide because we feel if we talk about it, it will increase that person's chances of actually committing suicide. And on the flip side, we feel that, or it is felt that people who talk about committing suicide, they're just looking for attention. So we feel if we give them that attention, they will commit suicide. So we tend to steer ourselves away from those, those hard conversations. Have you found those myths as well?
Actually, I found a number of myths online related to suicide, but those two that you mentioned were some that I had seen repeatedly across a number of different websites. So I think that
Hmm.
those are some of the most beliefs that people have. The idea that suicide, talking about it, may encourage someone to do it, or people may be worried that they may make things worse and not know what to say. So people just avoid having that conversation altogether. And this also adds to the idea that it is a taboo topic. But what the research has shown is that persons who are feeling suicidal, they don't want to but if worry or burden anyone with what they are dealing with, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, asking someone directly about suicide gives them permission really to tell you how they feel, and it can almost be like a huge relief for them. And once someone really starts talking, then they have a better chance really of looking at other options outside of suicide. So talking about suicide, people do believe that it may encourage it and may want to shy away from even having that conversation. Research has shown that talking about suicide has actually saved lives.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about research because you did research for today and so did I. Do you have
Mm,
any stats that you can share with us? Because as an outsider looking on, it seems as though, especially post COVID, that the rate of suicide has increased not only in Barbados but globally. Do you have any stats that you could share for us that would illustrate the gravity of suicide for us today?
Yes, I did do some research and I was able to find some statistics from the World Health Organization. I can read those for you. And I've also looked into some of incidences of suicide here in Barbados. You are absolutely correct in terms of the COVID-19 impact on persons' mental health, and that has been linked to deterioration in the mental health status of most persons across various demographics. But I just want to read out some of the statistics that I found, and these are statistics, as I mentioned, that are published by the World Health Organization, and these are their global statistics as it relates to suicide. They state that an estimated 703,000 people die by suicide worldwide each year, and over one in every 100 deaths in 2019 were a result of suicide. The global suicide rate, according to them, is twice as high among men than women, and over half of all deaths by suicide occur before the age of 50 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
that really gives a snapshot of how often suicide is occurring. Some people may think it's rare, but it's really not as rare as people think.
Mm-hmm.
What what the research has also shown as well too is that suicide rates are higher among vulnerable groups that are subjected to discrimination, so the LGBTI community, prisoners, refugees, and such and so forth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Suicide was noted to be the fourth leading cause of death in 15 to 29-year-olds. This is according to the World Health Organization. And even though suicide occurs in all regions across the world, they said that globally, 77% of those occurred in low to middle income countries. So that's just a general idea of, the people who are affected by suicide globally.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
And I know that your field is mainly substance abusers. Do you
mhm.
find that, suicide is more likely to occur in a demographic like somebody who's a substance abuser, or I know this may not be your field, maybe somebody who's incarcerated in prison, or like, is it like that in terms of vulnerability in a demographic?
Yes, I think absolutely, as the research has shown, that prisoners are part of the demographic where the suicide rates are high. And another risk factor is substance abuse as well and mental health disorders. And a lot of persons that we work with are substance abusers and they also have co-occurring disorders as well. So a lot of these clients do present with mental health issues and thoughts of suicide or suicide attempts. But it's also
Mm-hmm.
important to note too that even though a large number of persons who do have mental health issues are likely to, present with suicidal signs, a lot of persons who may not be suffering from mental health issues also are affected by suicide. In
Mm-hmm.
my research in terms of incidences in Barbados this year, I was able to read upon at least 6 cases of suicide. All of them were young males. Well, the cases that I saw were young males between the ages of 30 and 24 years old, and that was this year. These persons may or may not have mental health issues. And also in 2000, between 2000 and 2021, we also reported down here at least 5 cases of suicide across the male population. So males in general
Mm-hmm.
can be affected by suicide, but certainly those substance abusers or persons with co-occurring disorders are also part of the population that are most affected by incidences of suicide as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I spoke to somebody who had recently lost a relative
Mm-hmm.
to suicide. And, their description of like when you get the call, there's this physical hole in your chest and it's a pain that never ever goes away. And
Mm-hmm.
their comment was they couldn't understand why suicide even occurred. This person appeared to have it all. And that was a recurring theme as well
Mm-hmm.
for Miss USA, the former Miss USA, Chelsea Christ, I think was her name, where she looked as though she had it all, and
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't understand why she just jumped, from the building and committed suicide. So I guess we have like high performing people who look as though they have it all, and you ask them how they're doing, and they say they're okay. They look as though they're okay on the outside, but they're not. They're not
Mm-hmm.
okay. So my question is, in terms of suicide prevention and awareness, what does that really look like for us at work? And then we can
Mm-hmm.
look at home as well. But I wanted to start with at work because we spend most of our time there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, you're absolutely right in terms of people spending most of their time at work. Just referring to the comment you made when you first started, a lot of times persons brave face for the world. And well,
Mm-hmm,
inside, they may feel as though their world is closing in. So we can't really tell just by looking at a person that they may be suicidal, especially if persons appear to be doing well. But that's
mm-hmm,
not always the case. And in the workplace and generally at home, it's really important, especially in terms of suicide prevention, to be aware of the right? Be aware of the signs. And identifying these signs will really, I guess, require your own individual knowledge of that person and their usual behavior. You may notice some worrying changes in their routine or their demeanor. They may not seem very present. And of course, that may not be something very concerning, but it's still good practice to ask questions, ask someone, how they're doing. Maybe you notice something. Again, because people do put on a brave face. But
mm-hmm,
in terms of signs, it's really important to be aware of what the suicidal signs are. And I can
mm-hmm,
talk a little bit about those. This would be good for the workplace and again, generally in the household, among persons that you may generally interact with. But some of the more obvious signs of suicide would be a person being in a state of deep despair. So they feel really hopeless. They may verbalize or express that they don't have a will to live and they may be feeling trapped. This is one of the more obvious signs. They may also show self harming behaviors or even looking for ways to end their life, like buying things. Other things that may not be so obvious, especially if a person may be that way, is if they start to isolate or withdraw. This may be something that they normally do, but in some cases, they may do it more often than not. Also, changes in a person's sleeping patterns, maybe sleeping too much or not getting enough sleep at all. They may start to give away things that belong to them, and again, this may be a more obvious sign that a person may be thinking to harm themselves. And they may even give up on their hygiene and just generally taking care of themselves. Their interest in various activities may start to decrease, and those are some things that you can be aware of. In terms of at work, and what are some of the things that you really should look for in terms of how a person is at work is their ability to complete tasks. Look and see maybe if they're getting really easily frustrated at work. And this may not always be the case, and this person may not always be thinking about suicide, but
mm-hmm,
certainly it's something to be mindful of. They may not be able to manage projects properly. They may not be meeting their deadlines. So it's really important for companies to recognize also issues that they can create for their employees that can affect their mental wellness, because suicide and then any other form of self-harm usually is a result of a buildup from societal pressures and other internal conflicts. So you need to be mindful of, your employees and how they're managing their work situations, and just be looking to see, their general behavior and if anything seems a bit off.
Yeah. So I think that would be the key. If you have somebody who normally meets their deadlines, they're very meticulous in their work, very detailed, always
Correct.
on time and everything, and then all of a sudden, per se, you see them drifting into,
Correct.
not meeting deadlines, they're sloppy in their work, and they seem a little withdrawn, that could be a sign that you need to have a conversation. And are you promoting, I guess, if I don't feel as though I can have the conversation, I guess I can
Mm-hmm.
refer them to EAP or something like that, somebody that they would feel comfortable talking to. So in my conversation, I can say, you may not feel comfortable talking to me, but if you want,
Mm-hmm.
I can set you up with somebody that you can feel comfortable talking to. Because I remember that's one of the conversations we had about
Mm-hmm.
suicide, where we need to get people comfortable in
Correct.
speaking about it and creating that psychological safety at work, where you can
Mm-hmm.
come to me and talk to me, and it will be confidential, and I will really try my best to help you. But it
Mm-hmm.
seems as though it still can be hard to see the signs.
Mm-hmm.
It seems hard to see the signs. So I think, is there like resources or maybe training that would help us, more hone into a sign? Because I might be seeing you, Karen, today, and I don't really know you, and you might be suicidal, and then something happens, and I say, if only I'd pressed the conversation, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I should have gone and had tea with her. I'm a tea person. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
should have reached out instead of saying,
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow I will get to it, or it's okay. She said she was okay. So like, are
Mm-hmm.
there, I guess what I'm asking, do we have like any probing type questions where we can go deeper in a conversation, rather than we say, "How are you doing?" and then your response is, "I'm fine," and then we walk away because we believe you're fine, whereas in reality you are struggling with stuff, and
Right.
you're
Yeah.
struggling a lot, and we just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In terms of having that conversation, yes, I would always say, just to respond to what you mentioned earlier, is always great to just provide a listening ear to that person, even if you
Mhm,
need to have the conversation in private so that that person feels less embarrassed having the conversation in an area where other ears can hear. But certainly just providing a listening ear, being empathetic, showing support for them and helping them, to know that there are other options if they need to speak to a professional person, that they can do so. And you can follow up and provide them with that information so that they are getting the help that they need. But in terms of having that tough conversation, one of the ways that you can really bring up that topic maybe is to just point out some of these things that you've noticed, or some of these things that, seem a bit off. So, I noticed that you seem a bit edgy, and I'm not really sure this is not your usual self, and I just wanted to see if everything is okay. You just are not seeming like yourself lately. And with any conversation, how you deliver the message is really important. It's important that you are demonstrating that you care for this person and that you are being kind and sensitive. If you are really close to that person, so you have a really close relationship with this person, you can ask them directly. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about committing suicide? This may allow them to feel more comfortable having that conversation if there is someone that you're really close with. But certainly, generally, you should be listening more than you are speaking, because
mhm,
that person needs to feel heard. That person needs to feel supported. So you want to also give them your full focus, and understand that the conversation, as difficult as it may be for you to have it, is going to be very difficult for them too. This may be their first time opening up about how they're truly feeling with someone. And one of the things you can also do to encourage them is just to let them know that you appreciate their honesty and their ability to share the feelings with
mhm,
you. And then at that point, certainly try to link them with some professional resources so that they can then get the help that they need. But in terms
mhm,
of bringing up that conversation, if it is difficult for you, you can just start by mentioning some of the things that you've noticed. And if again you are really close to that person, ask them directly if they're thinking about harming themselves or committing suicide.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think I would add, when you're going to have this conversation, you might need to just have a bigger window of time, because you don't know where the conversation is going to go. And
Mhm.
I'm making this point because I know somebody told me they wanted to have the conversation,
Mhm.
and they started the conversation, but they really only had 15 minutes. So when the person
Okay.
started to open up, they had to cut them short. And I'm saying,
Right.
well, I don't know how did that really work? Because just as I'm starting to think I can share with you, then you have
Mhm.
to, you have to cut me off. So I think a word of wisdom would be allocate. I don't want to allocate 3 hours, but you need to allocate some considerable period of time, so that when the conversation really starts to open up and they're
Mhm.
sharing with you, you don't necessarily, have to cut them off to go to another meeting, or, take a call. Just let it be relaxed and let that person feel open enough, to share.
That's a
And
really good point.
I know somebody is saying, I'm going to see if I can bring the comment up. So Lynette is saying, in your experience, do people who decide to commit suicide, do they want to talk, or do they really just want to find an alternative at that point? So do I want to talk about suicide and not committing suicide or self harm, or do I just want to end it? Do I feel that much hopelessness and despair in whatever I'm going through,
Mhm.
that this is the only option that I am
Mhm.
seeing? What do you think?
I think that generally people who don't want to talk about suicide may have been persons who maybe were met with some negativity about it in the past. Maybe people were saying things like, you want to kill yourself, and, coming across very insensitive. And when that happens, people feel less inclined to want to reach out because of they don't feel supported. And I think if that happens enough, then a person may not want to really be open and honest. But I think for
Hmm.
the most part, people do want to have someone to just share what they're going through with. And I think that it may be difficult for them to bring that up, but certainly if you are showing your support for that person, then you should feel okay, let me have this conversation because this is someone I care about. This is really about life and death. And I care about you enough to find out how you're doing. And I'm going to ask you if you're thinking about harming yourself. But I think people generally do want to say what is going on with them if they have someone that they feel they can trust and that they can really feel supported by
And not judged.
and
And
not
Lynette
judged.
had an
Absolutely.
earlier comment. So please address the whole issue of public comment, where those people who have committed suicide are called selfish. This actually came up yesterday because I did a LinkedIn post, and this was a lot of conversation,
Mm,
because people see those who commit suicide as selfish. They're only thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about the
hmm
people who love them. They're
hmm
just trying to get out of whatever they're going through. They're not sharing. Have you heard that comment before? And what do you think about it?
I have heard that comment and I've seen it in terms of one of the things that leads to the stigma with suicide. This idea that people who take their own lives are selfish, or they took the
Mm-hmm.
easy way out. And those common labels, when you apply it to suicide, that of course impacts that stigma around suicide and people not wanting to seek help when they need it. So again, this goes back to the stigma being based on negative beliefs and attitudes. And this is something that we talked about earlier as being a myth, that people are just trying to get attention and they're not and they're selfish and that type of thing. But you really do need to consider for a moment that a person who is suicidal is experiencing such intense emotional pain at this point. Like they feel that this is the only thing that can relieve them. And it
Mm-hmm.
may seem selfish to a person, but for that particular individual, they think that this may be the only option for them. But that
Mm-hmm.
the label being called selfish adds to the stigma and the and of course the impact on people wanting to get help.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked briefly. I mentioned the US Miss, the former Miss USA who jumped from the building, and her mom was interviewed, right? And her
Hmm.
mom was saying, she knew her daughter was suffering from depression, but she just, didn't know the severity of it.
Hmm.
And because she really showed the outside world how much she was struggling. But the interesting
Okay.
thing was her daughter sent her a text before she actually committed suicide.
Hmm.
And I use this because I believe that it shows that I don't think she was being selfish in her mind.
Okay.
I'm just going to read a little bit. So this is what the text said. It said, I wish I could stay with you, but I cannot bear the crushing weight of persistent sadness, hopelessness, and loneliness any longer. I've never told you these feelings because I've never wanted you to worry, and because I
Mm.
hoped they would eventually change. But I know they never will. I've wished for death for years, and I know you would want to know and want to help, but I haven't wanted to share this way with anyone.
Mm.
I don't see that. I don't see suicide as selfish. I see it as people somehow thinking, you know what, I might be a burden. I can't bear this anymore. I don't want my mom or my dad or some other relative or friend to worry about me anymore or have to
Mhm.
go of their way to help me through this.
Mhm.
Maybe suicide is the only way.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, and you are absolutely right. People who are feeling suicidal, they don't want to burden anyone with the things that they're going through, and so they don't feel like they can discuss it. And I also agree with you. I don't think that's necessarily selfish because you care about a person so much, you don't want them to have to worry about what you are struggling with. But at the
Hmm.
same time, having that conversation with them, and one of the things about suicide prevention too is just being aware of the signs of depression and mental health conditions, but asking someone if they're suicidal, it can protect them. They do feel listened to and their feelings are validated. And at the same time, they're knowing that someone does care about them in spite of them feeling like they're a worry or a burden. They may recognize that, this person really cares about me. So I think that having these conversations with our loved ones, we need to have these conversations and reach out.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, I don't know how I would feel if I went up to somebody that I know and I said, based on your behavior, are you thinking of committing suicide? In a Caribbean perspective, I can't see that person saying yes. What I
Mhm.
have done is every time, there's an instance of suicide and it comes on the news or something, I will reach out to, maybe my son, maybe his friends, other people I know, young people in that category, age category, and I'd say, I just read this thing. This person just committed suicide. I just want you to know if you can't talk to your mom, dad, sister, brother, uncle, or aunt, just call me before you do anything. I'm here for you. I will listen. I will see how I can help because I just don't think that suicide, no matter how hard it is for you, no matter what you're going through, I think there's another option other than suicide. So I mean, at least I've let people know I'm there for them. They can talk. I am not a professional. I can probably try to get you professional help. But if you just want
Right.
somebody to talk to, because it's hard for the people on the other end. So I am going to lead into my next question. If I know somebody who has actually attempted suicide and they're recovering, how do I support that person?
A person who has attempted
Yeah,
suicide
so
in
they have
terms of
attempted
what the person
suicide and
does.
they're still with us. So for them, they're thinking they have failed. For me, I'm glad you have not failed because it gives me another chance to help you. But how do I actively go out? Like, what do I do to help you?
Well, really, what you can do is what you can generally do with anyone who may have been feeling suicidal in the past, which is really just talking to them, listening to them without judging them, letting them know, that they're not alone and that you care about them. I love what you said about, even if you're uncomfortable and it does happen and you can approach it that way, like, hey, if you're struggling with anything, I've seen this article, just know that you can reach out to me. I'm here if that makes the person feel more comfortable. You can also support them too by just encouraging them to think about other options to deal with their feelings. Again, so by linking them to some professional help And then always following up, being there for them, checking in with them, seeing how they're doing. At least they know that there's someone there to support them and that what they're going through, what they're struggling with, is not something that they have to do alone.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that based on everything I've been learning recently about suicide is people feel that they are alone. That is
Yes,
the issue. They feel they
yes,
are alone, they're in it, and they have nobody to turn to, and this is their, their only option. I
absolutely.
just wanted to share some other comments that we're having on the screen.
Great, lovely.
Karen is saying it's important to show empathy and compassion. If the person is not ready to talk about it, then we have to respect that and provide resources where they can go. And that's a good comment because they may
That's a
not
great
they may
comment.
not want to talk about it, and that's
Yes.
okay. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not here, to force them to talk. We're just
Mm-hmm.
here to provide them, with support. And then I
Yeah, so
have
it's,
another
mm-hmm.
comment where I think everybody agrees that we really need to take that time to
Yes.
listen and not just say we're listening and not listen,
Yes,
because
really listen to
having
a
an
person.
ear,
Mm-hmm.
yes, makes people
And
feel so much better.
and giving them your full attention too, so that they feel like they're being heard. So I think that that's really an important point.
Okay. So I'm going to put this comment up by Danielle. I'm not sure how you're going to answer. Should we use the term committed suicide, or is it better to say the person died by suicide? So this
That's
comes
a,
up too because some people are talking about, they're wondering if the perception of somebody committing suicide, and I'm using that term, is selfish
mm-hmm.
because it's from
Mm-hmm.
the I perspective. So do we say the person committed suicide or do we say they died by suicide? Do you think that would alleviate some of the stigma attached to not wanting to
Perhaps,
talk about it?
perhaps, because again, it's if you're looking at it from the perspective of a religious point of view, taking your own life is not something that's really looked on upon. It's something that most people like, look down upon.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition of suicide is death caused by injuring oneself with the intent to die. So I think maybe die by suicide may help, so that it's not an I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just going through some of the comments. We have, I don't think I put this one. The selfish comment speaks to a real lack of understanding of the issues surrounding suicide. Public awareness and sustained education is key to changing this and debunking the myths. Let's keep the
Mhm,
conversation going. And thank you, Lynette.
mhm.
That is why we're having the conversation, because it's okay to stand in the background and say, talking about suicide is taboo or people don't want to have the conversation. What are we actually doing about it? We need to bring it to the forefront, find
Yeah,
people who can speak to the topic and try to educate everybody.
absolutely.
Another person is saying check-ins from time to time is key. And actually, I'm gonna put this one up. I don't know if you wanna speak to it, Karen. They're saying, "Hi, Gail and Karen. A friend's daughter committed suicide in front of her father." Wow. What
Wow,
would you
that is.
say to that? Yes, the demons are deep, Marcia, but how do you begin to heal that? Like, yeah,
Mhm.
what advice would you give her father, Karen,
Yeah,
if
that
you were
can.
to?
Yeah, that would. I can't imagine something like that. I imagine that it would be extremely difficult seeing your loved one, especially your daughter, committing suicide. And suicide can really affect those bereaved by it as well too. And I would certainly suggest, real. I would certainly suggest, some professional help, because that can't be something that is easy for a father. That can be on his own emotional health as well too. So I would strongly suggest that person to seek some type of support, professional support to address, having gone through an experience such as that one.
Hmm. But as a friend, if I'm a friend of her father, how do I support him? He may not want to talk. He may be crying all of the time. I don't know. He may be emotional. I say crying. He may be emotional. How do I, how can I be there for him without crossing that boundary or without crossing that line he may have erected around himself because of all the pain he's going through?
Hmm. The most you can do is just let that person know that you're there until they're ready. Then they come to a point where they are wanting to. express how they're feeling. It could be very difficult for persons when things like this happen and they may not immediately know how to respond. They may be trying to make sense of what's happening and they may not want to have a conversation with anyone. But certainly just respecting that, respecting what they're going through in the moment, not trying to force them to do anything that they don't want to do in that point in time, but certainly just letting them know that you're there to help. If they need to talk, that they can reach out to you. Certainly keeping an eye on that person as well because you don't know what state that they're in either. So just really keeping an eye on that person and letting them know that they're there if and whenever they're ready to talk.
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be a very strange question, but I'm thinking that sensitizing and education should not only be for us on the outside
Hmm.
looking in, but maybe for those on the inside. And let me tell you why I say that. Because if I was exposed to somebody who had died by suicide and they're close to me, I don't think that it might be natural, but I don't think I should continually push people away from me who are trying to help me because then that still defeats the purpose. If you see what I mean. So
Understand.
it might be out in the news, yes, this happened to Gail, and somebody might want to bring food, but I can't eat. No, that is
Mhm.
obvious. I'm going through trauma, I can't eat.
Right,
But I should
right,
not push
right.
you away and say, I don't want anything, I don't want you coming by me, I don't want to talk. Yes, that may be so. But then it makes it so much harder for the person on the other end to try to help me. So I think I'm trying to say, in terms of sensitization, we might
Hmm.
still need to sensitize. If this happens to you and somebody
Hmm.
close to you commits suicide, this is how you help people help you. You don't push them away.
Right.
Open yourself to conversations. They just want to help. Genuinely, they just want to make sure you're okay. But the more you push them away, the harder it makes life for you. It makes them feel bad. And then that can also, I believe, push you now further into the depression that you really don't want because you're pushing people away. How can people help you if you push them away? So I think we need to find a way to sensitize the people who are actually going through it as well and say, listen, if this happens to you, this is what you need to do. Accept the food that you're not going to eat, let people come over
Hmm.
and sit with you even if they don't talk. I don't know, like, because I still think it's a balance. You have
Hmm.
two people here. You have the person who's died by suicide, and you have the people who are left behind that have to carry on, and
Yes.
then the rest of us who are trying to support this person who has gone through it. So, like, what words of wisdom, if that all makes sense? I'm just saying, I think
Hmm.
sensitization is not only on one end. It doesn't only fall on one set of shoulders. I think it falls on everybody, those going through it and those
Hmm.
trying to support the person who has gone through it.
Hmm. Yes, and what I would say to that is persons who have lived through the experience of suicidal or have persons commit suicide, they too internalize their feelings of shame, because maybe of the perception of how they may be viewed by their peers or even society. So you're right, they may not be wanting to get help necessarily. They may do stuff like pushing people away, but I think the best thing to do is to have these conversations. These conversations really allow for people to talk about the things that are uncomfortable about suicide. The more we have these conversations and the more awareness and prevention we can help to promote so that persons feel more comfortable having conversations or if they're affected by suicide, that they can have these conversations and not feel these feelings like shame and guilt, which may be preventing them from
Hmm.
wanting to get the help. So I
Hmm.
think that these conversations are really key and places like even the workplace, really should look at encouraging these types of conversations, trainings, things like that, so people just feel more comfortable and open talking about suicide.
I think that workplaces too should be a little more proactive. I spent, a lot of years working in retail, and
Mm-hmm.
there are things that happen to people working in retail. They could be minimum paid workers. They're
Mm-hmm.
not seen as human beings. They're not, they're disadvantaged by how they're treated. And you have to go to work every day in these conditions,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes because you have no choice. If you're female and you have your three children to support, you don't
Yeah.
want to beg, steal, borrow, you don't want to commit a crime. So you have to to go into this toxic work environment and try to survive. And I think it's hard. And I
Mhm.
think our leaders and our managers and executives can do a little more to make our working environments a little more, better to work in, psychologically safe, where I can come to you. Um, because when I commit suicide, then everybody's surprised. But really and
Yeah.
truly, there are little things that you did or did not do that after a while will build up. And they say about that straw that breaks the camel's back is that one
Yeah.
thing. It's just that one thing. And I've been struggling and struggling, and I just can't seem to make it work. And
Mhm.
so at the end of the day, maybe suicide is probably the best option, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm. Yes, companies absolutely need to do their role too in suicide awareness and prevention. So things like counseling services are activities that promote better mental health, mentally and physically, reducing stressors, or even getting an expert to come and talk about suicide. Just having a well-being program, things that will
Hmm.
encourage mental health and wellness in the workplace, because as we stated earlier, a buildup of stress and other factors in like with other things that a person may be dealing with can certainly be risk factors that can contribute or increase the likelihood of suicide actually occurring. So I do think that companies also need to play a role. We all need to play a role in suicide prevention, but I think that employers really certainly do need to provide that support for their employees as far as mental health is concerned.
Hmm. And actually, I'm going to put this comment up, and I was going to talk about it because people who work in HR, they
Okay.
occupy a very special, unique space because they have to manage their own stuff and manage the stuff of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so this person is saying encouraging people to own their feelings has helped them over the years in HR, owning what they're experiencing and the anger of hopelessness that the situation brings, as in accepting this is what it is, this is what I'm going through, helps to get
Mm-hmm.
past the initial anxiety or depression to a point where we can start to build. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess in HR, you need to have those skills, those foundational
Mm-hmm.
skills as part of your training to help you manage a situation like this. I mean, I guess
Correct.
there's grief, there's other grief as well, loss,
Mm-hmm.
normal loss, but I think
Mm-hmm.
losing somebody to suicide seems to hit a different chord, is deeper, is more traumatic,
Yes.
um, than if the person just died. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want anybody to die, but
Absolutely.
I think suicide is,
Yeah.
it just has so many other moving parts to it
Yes.
that makes it
You're
that much
absolutely right.
harder for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So, in your job with substance abuse or substance abusers, what does that look like and feel for you in terms of managing somebody in this space? So, this person is a substance abuser. Do you automatically assume that they may commit suicide because of the substance abuse, or do you work with them until they exhibit signs that may suggest that? How does that work for you in your role?
Yeah, I never make assumptions, but what I do is always check in with the client, and if the client is saying that they want to harm themselves, then of course I need to, as a professional, then reach out and let persons know and provide this person with emergency services so that they can get the help that they need. But certainly, a lot of persons who abuse substances, as I mentioned earlier, are suffering with other mental health issues like depression. And when a person is using substances, their impulses they're more impulsive, and so they make more risky decisions. And
Hmm.
so again, the likelihood of suicide can increase. So it's very important when you are working with persons like this to just be mindful of what these signs of suicide are, so that notice any, you can ask the important questions to get this person the help that they need. A lot of the clients that I do work with have had suicidal thoughts and have made suicidal attempts in the past. But again, as we would have said, substance abusers are part of the population where suicide rates are highest. But again, it's
Hmm.
all about being non-judgmental, giving them a listening ear, and allowing them to express themselves, talk about what's going on with them, and just being that source of support. But of course, if that person is suicidal, you do need to act quickly and make the important calls that you need to in order to get this person the help that they need.
I agree. So I'm gonna just put up one last comment from Danielle, and she's saying not every depressed person develops suicidal thoughts, and not every person who dies by suicide is depressed. And yes, I believe that's a fact, because when I was trying to arrange this, and I was trying to consider, so like, what are the causes of suicide? And the first thing people say, oh yeah, that's somebody that's depressed, or that's somebody who has mental issues. And I'm saying, no, I'm not a professional, but I disagree. I don't think that every depressed person out there is going to develop suicidal thoughts, and it's kind of
Mhm.
individual. Suicide is
Yes,
more on an individual basis, and that's how we should, consider it.
that's
So we
correct.
don't have any more questions or comments in the chat. Karen, what is the one biggest message or takeaway that you would like to leave with our viewers before I share the information, like how they can reach you if they
Okay,
wanted to
great.
continue the conversation with you?
What I would say my takeaway would be that talking about suicide can save lives, and it's a conversation. It's a difficult but necessary conversation, and it's really
Hmm.
important that we are having more and more of these conversations because people
Yeah,
are struggling, and persons are struggling, are suffering in silence, but having these conversations, making people feel more open to having discussions just like this, can allow persons to be educated so that the myths that people have, can be dispelled. And better education, of course, will lead to greater awareness and prevention of suicide. So I think that my takeaway from today's panel discussion is talking about suicide can save lives.
I agree. Which means that suicide can be prevented, and I'm very glad that we have
It
established
can be
that.
prevented. Yes.
And just before we go, we have one other quick question from Lynette. What are the reasons for suicide other than depression? I think we covered that, but can you just recap for Lynette?
Mhm. Certainly, major life changes. A person may be experiencing significant stressors coupled with um, situations like mental health issues, like depression, or other mental health issues like bipolar disorder and others that persons may be suffering for. But certainly, a number of stress related issues culminate
Mhm.
and can cause a person to express or have feelings of wanting to commit suicide. So, there's so many other reasons for a person wanting to commit suicide than depression that needs to be taken into consideration because, as the other comment said, not everyone who commits suicide is depressed, and not every person who is depressed commits suicide. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's okay. That's okay, Lynette. She's saying she's sorry she missed it, but we don't mind
okay,
recapping for you. So, everyone here, we thank you for joining us today. Let me just share some information. If you wanted to reach Karen to have this conversation and continue it, I am just going to put her information here. So, there's a 24-hour hotline, and you can also reach her on email. And then, of course, there is Verdun and Marina House Spaces of Hope and Healing.
mhm.
I'm just going to put that in the chat for you as well. Actually, maybe what I can do too is put it on the screen and show.
Okay,
So the
great. That's yeah.
24-hour hotline is 1246-243-0038. The email is help at Verdun House.
Mhm.
And Verdun House is a space of hope and healing where you can get the help that you need. And I've included their website address for you. So, Karen, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure. I wanted to thank everybody who joined us today. Before you go, just make sure you let us know if you were watching it on the live. So you just put Team Live. But if you couldn't be with us and you're watching it on the replay, you just put Team Replay. Also, let us know where you joined from today. And Karen, I'm sure you'll be back. We'll have another conversation about this because I believe that suicide prevention and awareness should not only be brought to the forefront in September.
That's
I
correct.
think
I
that
agree
we
with
should be
that.
talking about it all through the
All
year
year
because there's
round.
so many different areas of it that we can
Hmm.
delve into. So stand
Hmm.
by for a part two. And I know you're going to say yes when I call you. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and we will see you again very, very soon. Thanks for
thank,
joining us.
thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Okay, bye bye.